It's really good to be here. All right, again. All right, so my topic for today is political satire and impoliteness strategies. So basically, this is the second part of my PhD. Last year, I presented the first part of my PhD, which was basically on conceptual metaphors. And this is the second part, which is on impoliteness strategies. The title of my dissertation was A Comparative Study of Major Linguistic and Situational Features of Selected Samples of Political Satire on Egyptian and American Television. All right, so the aim of the study was basically, to provide a critical discourse analysis of the language of political satire presented on Egyptian and American television by comparing two famous political satire shows, namely Elbernameg, or The Program, which is anchored by Bassem Youssef in Egypt, and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. So a very famous program in Egypt and another famous program in the United States. The importance of the study. When I did this comparative study, I wanted to shed light on three things: the method of doing satire, the role of culture on satire, and the relation between the satirical product and power relations, and how we can know more about the power relations in the society. My research question for this part was, what are the selected impoliteness strategies employed in Egyptian and American satirical programs on television? And there were two sub-questions. One, what are the similarities in the selected impoliteness strategies between the two programs? And B, what are the differences in the selected impoliteness strategies, again, between the two programs? Now, the limitations of the study, before we delve deeper into the details, I focused on the verbal texts, and what they are actually saying, and I didn't focus on semiosis or prosody, because, as you know, there are a lot of details and a lot of things, to include. So this time I chose to focus on the verbal texts. Now, why satire? Now, this is a genre that encompasses both sarcasm and irony. And according to Caulfield, 2007, he says, satire is not often considered an important form of political dialogue, but it serves many distinct and important roles in a democratic society. It encourages four things: critical debate, sheds light on perceived wrongs within a society and its government, points out hypocrisy, and makes political criticism accessible to the average citizen. And this is actually a very important point, because we know that sometimes people who are not into politics, or maybe they are not very well educated, they watch these shows because they want to enjoy the show, and they want to have some laughs, but still they actually get some of the wrongdoings of the society, and they start to realize what is going on. Now, when we talk about political satire shows, sometimes in the literature, they are referred to as soft news, fake news, satire news, mock news, propagandament, and infotainment. All right, so of course, it is a little bit of information, entertainment, propaganda, and a lot of different things, but infotainment is the term that is usually used in the literature. All right, if we talk about programs and shows from all over the world, we will notice that there are so many. So in the USA, across the years, there was Politically Incorrect, the Culpeper Report, of course, The Daily Show, and Saturday Night Live. In Romania, the Tatler Statul, Italy as well, Australia, All right, you have in Melbourne tonight, Normal Gunston show and Newstopia. Canada, this hour has 22 minutes and others. The UK, the same thing, all right? So you have a lot of different shows, you know, all over the world. Of course, some of these shows, stopped, and some others, as you know, can pop to the surface. But the idea is that it is actually a very common kind of show that we will see on television. In Egypt, of course, you know, the most famous is Elbernameg. And even though it stopped right now, but it is still considered one of the famous shows. Now, let me give you a little bit of background about the impoliteness strategies and this framework that I used. I used Culpeper's 1996 and 2005 super strategies. And of course, the impoliteness strategies are taken from Brown and Levinson's politeness, or this is like a mirror of Brown and Levinson's 1987 politeness. The first impoliteness strategy is the bold on record. And this is basically that the face threatening act is performed in a direct, clear, unambiguous manner. The second one is the positive impoliteness, which is the use of strategies designed to damage the addressee's positive face wants. Negative impoliteness, the use of strategies designed to damage the addressee's negative face wants. Sarcasm or mock politeness, which is the use of politeness strategies that are obviously insincere. Number 5, withhold politeness, which is the absence of politeness where it should be expected. So, when you are supposed to say thank you or something, but then you don't. The one that was added in 2005 was the off-record impoliteness. And this is basically the face-threatening act being performed by means of an implicature. So people can guess, and understand between the lines. So these are the 6 super strategies. Now, when we talk about positive impoliteness and negative impoliteness, we have what is called the output strategies, or like how they are performed. So with positive impoliteness, we have 9 output strategies. And with negative impoliteness, we have 5 output strategies. So for the positive impoliteness, for the output strategies, we have the first one, ignore, snub the other, failure to acknowledge the other's presence, or exclude the other from an activity, dissociate from the other, use inappropriate identity markers, like titles, use obscure or secretive language, seek disagreement, make the other feel uncomfortable, use taboo words like swearing, and call the other names. For negative impoliteness, we have to frighten as number 1, as an output strategy. We have condescend, scorn, or ridicule. Number 3, invade the other's space, whether literally or metaphorically. Explicitly associate the other with a negative aspect. And the last one is to put the other's indebtedness on record. So you can see that there are a lot of different things, to look at when it comes to impoliteness. All right, if we talk about the research design and how I went about the details of the analysis, I used both a qualitative and quantitative approach. The qualitative, of course, approach is mostly subjective in nature, because I had to read, first listen and then read the transcription, and then I had to decide on the impoliteness strategies used. The quantitative approach was basically to come up with some frequency counts and percentages to be able to decide on the impoliteness strategies used. The idea is that when you have frequency counts, it's easier to see the similarities and the differences between the 2 programs. Now, the programs chosen, as I said, were Elbernameg, or the program anchored by Bassem Youssef in Egypt. And the other one is the Daily Show with Jon Stewart in the States. There were actually two criteria for choosing the programs. The first one was that both programs more or less have the same format. So they start with a monologue, and then they have the correspondence reports, and then they end up with an interview. Basically, the interview part, of course, I did not use, because usually the interview part was the most serious part of the show, when they really have an interview with a guest. So this, I didn't use the interviews. And then they were also broadcasts at the same time, at one point in time. So I used some episodes from April, May, and June 2013. Now, the episodes themselves. Now, the criteria for choosing them was basically, or one criterion was basically related to the fact that they were broadcast in April, May, and June 2013. And this led to an overlap of some topics discussed, which is actually very interesting, so that you can see the similarities and the differences, especially when it came to Muslim Brotherhood and former President Morsi, because this was something that was discussed a lot, in 2013. And then there was another thing that I really liked, was that Stewart talked about Youssef, all right, in his show on April 1, 2013, and he mentioned Youssef by name. And then he was later a guest on Youssef's show on June the 8th, 2013. So I thought that this was really interesting to have this kind of interaction between, the two anchors. Of course, again, I didn't use the interview part that Bassem had with Jon Stewart, just because, I decided, to focus more on the monologue. Now, for the data collection, for Elbernameg, or the program, I used 176 minutes. They were taken from YouTube. So basically, I used 4 episodes from season 2. The episodes presented by Bassem Youssef were actually a bit longer than those presented, or the excerpts found, for the Daily Show. And that is why for the Daily Show, I used 11 segments from season 18, and the total was 126 minutes approximately. So these are the dates of the different parts and shows that, or the episodes that I used. All right, for the transcription, all right, first, the episodes were transcribed with the nonverbals by me and another professional in the field, but then everything was revised by myself, all right? And then the translation, whether it was literal or idiomatic, I did the translation. All right, for the Daily Show, again, they were transcribed with the nonverbals, and I got the help of 2 other professionals in the field. But then also I had to do some, and then finally it was, I had to do all the revisions. Of course, this is actually a piece of advice, it's sometimes easier to do the transcription yourself, because I discovered that sometimes people are not very accurate, or they might disregard certain aspects that you would actually focus on. And that's why it is really very good, if you do the transcription yourself, or at least make sure that you revise all the details yourself. All right. Okay, now there was a challenge that I really have to admit. All right, there is a need to have a lot of background information about the 2 countries. All right, so for example, in Egypt, even though I am Egyptian, I'm not going to call myself, I'm very much knowledgeable about everything that happens in Egypt in terms of politics and, leaders and all of these things. But I discovered that I really had, to know a lot of things to be able to analyze everything that I wanted. So I had the political background, names of politicians, names of movies, posters, songs, all of these things. So for example, there was a reference to the presidency and the drummer But you have to know that this is actually a reference to a very famous movie in Egypt called The Politician and the Belly Dancer. There was a reference to the wazir or the minister factor, which is again a reference to the very famous program, the X Factor. In the USA as well, you have to know a lot of political background, names of senators, movies, and sometimes, of course, you know, you don't have this information. So, for example, NRA, so it's the National Rifle Association, CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference, IRS, Internal Revenue System, Tea Party members, conservatives. And then sometimes there were things that are a little bit, you know, more specific. Like, for example, Jon Stewart once mentioned Portmanitis. And I was like, I'm not sure what Portmanitis is. And then I had to Google, and then I discovered that there was a senator called Robert Portman. Robert Portman was against gay marriages. But then at some point he discovered that his son was gay. So he started supporting, you know, gay marriages. So the idea of changing your stance, Jon Stewart referred to it as a disease, and he decided to call it Portmanitis. So of course you wouldn't know that if you don't know the history of the senator and, you know, his son and all of these things. All right. Now, this is just, you know, an example of how, you know, I reuse the examples in my PhD. So I would describe the situation, and then I would have, you know, the actual sentences written, and then I would have the literal translation, and then finally I would use the idiomatic translation so that it makes sense to the reader. The same thing, you know, for Jon Stewart. You know, I would explain the situation, and then I would put exactly what he said. And this is also a very nice example when he said lock, stock, and as if he forgot the word barrel. All right. And he was referring to Perry, Rick Perry, who actually during the 2011 presidential debate forgot one of the three main agencies he wanted to eliminate. So again, I was not aware of the mistake, you know, Rick Perry made, you know, when he was giving his speech. So, so it's very interesting how, you know, this gives you a lot of background information. All right. The framework of analysis, as I said, was basically using Culpeper's model of impoliteness from 1996 and 2005. And now we come to the similarities and the differences between the two programs. All right. The impoliteness strategies used in Elbernameg, all right, you can see that there was a little bit of reliance on negative impoliteness, followed by off-record, bold on record, and then positive impoliteness. And for the Daily Show, again, he used negative impoliteness a lot, but then this was followed by positive impoliteness, bold on record, and off-record impoliteness strategies. All right, so if we look at the details here, all right, we will notice that, all right, so both programs use negative impoliteness, all right? And you can see that with Bassem Youssef, it was 53.2, so this is a lot. And then with the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, it was 31.5%. Off-record impoliteness was used by both, but it was used more by Bassem Youssef. And then here you can see that it was used only 15.1% by Jon Stewart. Positive impoliteness and bold on record, they were equal. 10.6, and positive impoliteness and bold on record, they were a little bit different in Stewart's show with 28.8 and 24.7%. It's interesting also that both programs did not withhold politeness, and they did not use mock politeness. Maybe this is because of the nature of the TV show, you know. I mean, and it is a political, and it is a satirical show, so there was no need to withhold politeness, all right, and there was no need to use mock politeness. All right. When we talk about the output strategies, as we saw, I just want to highlight, you know, some of the output strategies that were used. So with negative impoliteness, both programs, you know, they used condescend, scorn, and ridicule. So the idea of making fun of people or of situations, you know, was used a lot. Bassem Youssef 92%, and also Jon Stewart 95.6%. When it came to explicitly associate the other with a negative aspect, it was 8% and 4.4% respectively. Positive impoliteness, the output strategies, they used a lot, both of them used a lot of taboo words, like the F words or other things. And then they also used a lot of calling the other names. So again, Bassem Youssef used it 40% and Jon Stewart used it 23% of the time. When it came to the differences in the output strategies, it was basically the number of output strategies. So with Bassem Youssef, with impoliteness, he used 2, negative impoliteness, he used 2. The Daily Show, there was more of like a variety. So positive impoliteness, Jon Stewart used 5, and negative impoliteness, he used 3. All right, it's interesting also to know that this is quite similar to other research papers. So both programs, as we said, use negative impoliteness and positive impoliteness, and this was made clear in other research paper like Hamoud and Abdul Rasul 2017 and Lorenzo et al 2011. The super strategy of bold on record or being direct was used in both programs, as is the case with other research in on impoliteness like Abdul Ghani 2018 and Hamoud and Abdul Rasul in 2017. The super strategy of off-record impoliteness was used in both programs, and it was also common in other research papers like, you know, Abdul Ghani and Lorenzo et al. Neither program used withhold politeness, as we said, and this was also the case with other research papers like, again, Abdul Ghani and Hamoud and Abdul Rasul. The research also shows that impoliteness was used more by males than females. And knowing that Bassem Youssef and Jon Stewart are both males, it's actually interesting to see in the future if we have some satirical shows that will be presented by women. All right, will we notice a difference or not? That will be very interesting, you know, to know. All right, I actually included a tiny part also on impoliteness and Greit's cooperative principles. When we talk about negative impoliteness, we know that we are flouting the maxim of quality. Positive impoliteness, we are flouting the maxim of relevance and manner. Bold on record abides by all the maxims, and off-record impoliteness, it flouts the maxim of manner. So flouting some of the maxims here is like, it's really very interesting, all right, because, you know, you feel that there are a lot of different details, you know, that people can really look at. Now, when we talk about the power relations, which is one of the things that I really wanted to know about, we will notice that in Egypt, there is an evident change, because it is not very common for a person to come on TV and start calling names or use taboo words. This is something very strange, you know, so this is really evident. It happened in Youssef's show, but for the United States, there was actually no evident change, you know, because, I mean, it happened before in other shows and it is still happening. Now, for the limitations of the study, as we said, you know, the idea that there was no analysis, detailed analysis of the visuals or the prosthetic features like, you know, intonation and the rhythm and all of these things. Maybe in the future, somebody can work on these. Definitely, there was an overlap of impoliteness strategies. All right, so sometimes this makes it hard, you know, for you to see, I mean, am I going to put it here or there? So my recommendation for future research is maybe we can use a multimodal approach for analysis. And of course, this has happened a lot in other research papers. So it may be something like the use of reading images, Kras and Van Leuven in 2006 can be used. Maybe the analysis also of impoliteness strategies using triggers that actually Culpeper came up with in 2011. I think this will be also very, very interesting. And then when we come to the last thing, which is implications for teaching, I believe that we should choose texts where we can focus on the rhetorical situation, make sure that we analyze the text with our students and discuss what is common or uncommon. We have to delve deeper into the hidden messages via implicature and describe definitely the role of culture in the texts. All right, these are my references, and thank you. Thank you so much.